Hey, I'm Anya, Realtor with Bosley Real Estate and host of Who's in My House, the Toronto Real Estate podcast with honest conversations and expert perspectives. Let's see who's in my house. Today we have a very special guest and a good friend of mine, Jacob.
Hi, everybody.
Jacob, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I can. My name is Jacob. I am a colleague and good friend of Anya's. We've been working together for probably 6 years now, something like that.
5.
A while. And I think we make a great team.
We sure do.
Yeah. I'm a mortgage broker, which means that I help people with financing for residential properties, and I love what I do.
Yeah, and you answer all of my many questions all the time.
Yes.
Which is very helpful.
Late into the evening via text message.
Hey, I don't text you late very often.
No, that's true. You don't.
I try to be respectful.
Yeah.
I have a new policy, actually. I don't answer my phone after 8 o'clock.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Like nothing?
Unless it's an active offer or like a client, it's like something that I know is time sensitive. If someone, like an agent calls me after 8 o'clock and 90% of the time they want feedback on a house I showed 2 hours prior.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
You can call me tomorrow during business hours.
For sure.
It's like a very good work-life balance boundary.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have to.
I'm still working on that.
Okay.
The whole boundary thing. I have kids, which helps.
I was going to
I can just say I'm actually doing things with my kids.
You're literally wiping a dirty butt.
Bedtime, bath time, like all of the stuff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like a boundary that is hard to overcome.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do have like my calendar open in the evenings most days of the week for clients who want to meet then, because sometimes we're working with clients who are normal 9-to-5ers.
And if it's scheduled, that's different. But if someone just like decides to call you at 8 o'clock to ask you a quick question, no,
yeah,
it can wait till tomorrow, unless it's like we're actively like it's actually time sensitive.
For sure, because we've been in touch in the evening when it's offer night.
Yeah,
or
offer night.
Competitions.
Okay, so I think just to kind of start, I guess it would be easiest to follow like the pathway of the purchase, and talk about like each phase. So first phase, someone decides they want to buy. Generally, they'll either contact someone like you first or someone like me, and then vice versa will be like, you need to be in touch with a mortgage broker, you need to be in touch with an agent. What do you normally tell people when they first reach out to you, like first things that they need to get done?
Yeah, the first thing is always at least a pre-qualification. So we can talk about, what a pre-qualification means versus a pre-approval, but it's smart to get that done before you go out and looking at properties, because you never want to have the wrong expectation as far as what your budget can be.
Totally.
And people, sometimes have a rough idea. They use some online calculators. Maybe they talk to somebody at their bank as well to get an idea of what their potential budget could be.
Yep.
But it's important to do that deep dive, because in respecting their client's time, my time, and your time, we always want to make sure that we're all on the same page about whatever the budget's going to be.
Yeah, and I say pretty much the same thing. Like the first question is, how far into this like prep process are you? Have you spoken to a mortgage broker? And, the online calculators can give you maybe a rough estimate, but they don't look at your credit and your debt and any of that kind of stuff. So I will usually say before we start actively looking, you would at minimum need to have spoken to a mortgage broker to get a pre-qualification. You don't need a full, I'm okay showing you properties without a full pre-approval, as long as especially if they've spoken to you, because I know that you're very thorough. But if they're just like chatting to someone on the phone who's like some random, it's different. I trust
for sure
them when it's coming from you. So yeah. And do you want to quickly just touch on the difference between a pre-qualification and pre-approval?
Yeah, for sure. So like you were saying earlier, when a client comes to you after speaking with me and Jacob says, we've got this budget, but he's working on the pre-approval in the background, my initial call with the clients is usually what I would call a pre-qualification. I ask them some very high-level questions about their overall financial situation. We touch on income and employment, which is one of the first of the 3 pillars of qualification, I like to call them. Income and employment are definitely the most important. Whether you're salaried or hourly or self-employed or any of those things will definitely have a big effect on how much a lender is willing to lend you. So we talk about that. We talk about down payment. So how much you have saved up, your sources of down payment, whether they're coming from your own resources, gifted down payment from family, borrowed down payment. And then we look at credit as well. Most people have like a rough idea of what their credit score is. Sometimes when I'm on the call with the clients, I will pull credit while we're on the call, so I can look through and see if there's anything that jumps out at me as a potential red flag. Because sometimes people just don't know. There could be like a loan, an old loan that they, forgot about, and that's actually dragging down their score. Sometimes people have multiple credit profiles. It happens sometimes where they'll have 2 or 3 profiles with Equifax, and we can then reach out to Equifax and combine them. It's just these things that sometimes take time to mitigate.
Right.
That's good to, address them up front, so they're not going that weekend to make
then
an
you
offer
and
on
then
a
you
property,
find a property, and then you go into your financing condition, and now you've got
it takes way longer than like 5 business days to sort it out, and we might as well just take care of it earlier in the process.
And another thing could be is it your credit utilization? Is that what it is? So like if you have more than, like if you consistently are at more than 50% of your credit limit, that also can hurt your credit, right?
Yeah, for sure. Utilization plays a big part in it. I would always recommend keeping your balance under 50% of the limit. If you do go over 50%, just do your best to pay it off quickly.
Yeah.
Paying it off at the end of every month is very important as well. The diversification of your credit, so having credit cards, personal lines of credit, student loans, car payments, all the different types. If you have just one type of credit, like you have 2 credit cards with a lower limit and you don't use them very much, it looks good to have them, but at the end of the day, it's not going to help to build the maturity of your credit profile, and it doesn't show lenders that you can handle, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, because that's really what they're qualifying you for.
It's actually kind of interesting, as a side note, that, like common sense, you would think keep your credit limits low. You have, say, $5,000, you stay below that, whatever, not a big deal. And that credit, like that the credit bureau would think that having a lower credit limit is good, because you're not, like, you don't have the option to take out all this money. But rather, if you're spending on average $5,000 on your credit card a month and your limit is $5,000, it's way better to have a $15,000 limit if that's offered to you, and then stay at $5,000. Like, you'd think that it would look better to have the lower limit. Does that make sense?
For sure. It for people who may be irresponsible with their credit, it helps to have a lower limit, because then it provides
then you don't end up
a ceiling for how much you can spend. But typically when you have a limit that you approach and then you pay it down, the credit card company will come to you like the next day and offer you a higher limit and say, oh, we're looking to increase to 10,000. What do you think?
It's crazy. I remember when I started in real estate, I wanted to get a specific credit card for, like, to use for business. And the, like, TD, because I was self-employed, TD wouldn't give me more than like $2,500 on a limit unless I did a GIC backed credit card and I like gave them $5,000 or something.
Right.
And I was like, that's stupid. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So I like lived with the $2,500. I would just like pay it off as I went. And very quickly they started offering me increases often.
Oh, yes.
And they were like, oh, we like you. You pay your credit card off. Yeah. And now my limit's way higher. But I was so mad. And at that time, I was like, there's so many people that have crazy high credit limits that are not responsible with it. I'm here, like, I have a perfect, profile. I'm like so type A, and you won't give me any money. Yeah. It was so annoying.
Yeah. But you proved yourself. And now
I sure did.
They saw you as low risk and potential to spend a lot of money, so they'll just start throwing the higher limits at you. I recommend to accept it, as long as it's not egregious and as long as it's something you think that you might use one day. Having a history of responsible use of credit is very important when you're applying for a mortgage.
Totally. Okay, so someone meets with you, they get their pre-qualification, then they come to me, and one of the other big things that I'll talk to them about is the deposit. So when you start looking for a home, to secure an offer, similar to like, if you are getting a car, like you put a deposit down. So when you sign the offer, you'll give a deposit. In Toronto, very often that's about 5% of the purchase price, depending on, sometimes higher price points are higher deposits. And that is something that you need to have ready. So a lot of people will have their down payment in their, like, most of it's in their RRSP or it's in investments, and it needs a couple days to liquidate. You have to have that deposit ready to go as soon as you start looking at properties.
Yes.
And then the other thing that, like, problem that I've run into is when people have it with, something like Simply Financial that doesn't have a physical location that they can go get a bank draft from. There's sometimes a delay, like you have to call them and then they'll send a bank draft to their partner bank, and then sometimes it can take longer.
Yep. And
that deposit usually has to be given within 24 hours. Otherwise the deal falls apart. So always have 5% of your max budget, I tell clients, as soon as we start looking, in your bank account ready to go. So if you need to walk into a bank at 3 p.m. on Tuesday, you can get that bank draft.
Totally. Yeah. And a big bank, like you said, it has to be somewhere where you can walk into a branch.
Yeah. Totally. And a question I get from a lot of buyers, like first time buyers, is whether that's an extra 5% or if it counts as their down payment.
Yeah, great question. It definitely counts towards your down payment. So it's held in trust by the listing brokerage until we get closer to closing day. And then your lawyer accounts for that as part of the down payment when they're doing their disbursements on closing day. So whatever you're owing in addition to that deposit, so say your down payment is going to be 10% and you put 5% down as the deposit, you're owing the rest of the other 5% closer to closing.
And another thing that I'll get asked sometimes is, can people pay the deposit from their RRSP?
It depends on how long it's going to take to redeem the RRSP, because like you said, it takes a while to liquidate funds. Even if the RRSP is with a big bank, sometimes it might take a few business days for the RRSP to get cashed out into your checking account, for example.
And most big banks will require an accepted agreement of purchase and sale to even let you take the money out.
For the home buyer's plan.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. So what I have, like, some workarounds for people that might, like, everything is in their RRSP is we'll do a 2-tiered deposit. So we'll say whatever you have available, liquid, put that as a start, and then we'll do the balance within 5 business days or however long it takes to get it from your RRSP. So recently I had a client, I think the deposit was like 40 grand, let's say, and they had 15,000 liquid and the rest was coming from their RRSP. So we did 15,000 within 24 hours of acceptance, and then the balance within 3 business days once they were able to pull from their RRSP. And another thing, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the deposit doesn't necessarily have to come from the buyer. So if, I'm buying my first house and I don't have the deposit liquid, it's in investments, my mom could, pay the deposit for me and then I can pay her back or whatever it is.
Yes,
right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I was actually going to say there's a couple other workarounds as well. One of them is if you are getting gifts from family, if mom and dad have access to a bank draft really quick that they can help you out, or even wire it to the listing brokerage for you, that's a good move in a pinch, and you can pay them back, or that can just be part of the gift in general.
Yeah.
And actually one that we just worked on together, they didn't have any liquid funds, so he pulled from his personal line of credit. And then once the RRSP was redeemed, he paid back his personal line of credit, and we showed that paper trail, and everything was good. So you can pull from credit as well to make the deposit in a
there's a lot of workarounds that we can kind of get you if you are in that specific situation where you just don't have the money liquid.
Yeah. But it's important that we plan for that in advance, because if it comes to, you have your offer accepted and now you have 48 hours or 24 hours to come up with the deposit and you're not sure where it's coming from, it's something we can plan in advance.
Yeah. And I know both of us go through that on our initial calls too. Like I'll always flag to clients the situation with the deposit, and I'll ask if that's something that will be a problem. And then they'll kind of say, oh, well, we have everything in our first home, like our FHSA is going to be what we're using for the deposit. Might be a little bit tricky. So then we'll kind of have a game plan ahead of time.
Yeah, for sure.
While we're talking on the topic of pre-approvals, a pre-approval is not actually a final approval.
Correct.
What is the difference?
Great question. So from the lender side, you're working with a bank, let's say TD Bank, for example, RBC, whatever it is, whoever you're doing your mortgage with, the due diligence that they do on the pre-approval is sometimes quite limited. They'll take an application from you. They might collect a couple of documents. They might pull your credit and review your credit, but it's really just an initial kind of assessment of your situation, saying, here is your max budget. Once you have an offer accepted on a property, that's when a lender will invest the time to do a thorough review of your application, your credit, and all of your documents. So one of the advantages of working with a mortgage broker like myself is that I do a lot of due diligence upfront. You know that I'm very, very thorough, but that mitigates any issues that might come up closer to closing, which does happen, unfortunately, when you're working with a lender that may not do as much due diligence up front. And then it comes down to a couple weeks before closing. They're like, oh, wow, we haven't reviewed this file yet. We're closing in a couple weeks. We better get on it. And then all of a sudden these things start coming up that they didn't know about in advance. The reason why I collect so many documents up front is to make that's the most intensive part of the whole process. Once we get closer to closing, I have everything I need already.
Yeah.
I know all the answers to the questions that the lenders are going to ask me because I've already asked those of the clients. So the pre-approval, when I'm doing it with the client, is very as close to a firm approval as you can possibly get. Really the only variable in that situation is the property itself, because we haven't found the property.
Correct.
So we have the client's financial profile, airtight. Once we get the property, there's a little bit of due diligence that may have to be done there. An appraisal sometimes comes up that we need to get done if we think there's an issue with the value, like the client paid more than the current market value, which doesn't happen with your clients, but sometimes it does happen. We need to make sure that we can get a rush appraisal done within the financing condition period so that we have the value that we need.
Yeah, totally. You need the property. You need the accepted agreement of purchase and sale to really get to that final approval. What are some things that you find might be contained in an agreement of purchase and sale that would be a flag to a lender that could potentially cause an issue with financing?
Yeah, so sometimes I find that the property taxes or the maintenance fees that are listed on the MLS aren't accurate, especially when we're like mid-year and then things are getting updated for like new budget years and that type of thing. We might have an amendment to the purchase agreement saying that, oh, the maintenance fees for this year are actually a little bit higher.
Yeah.
It doesn't usually cause an issue unless somebody's trying to borrow at like their maximum capacity.
Right.
But sometimes that comes up. Obviously, having the conditions in your offer is very important. The financing condition gives me the opportunity to get that firm approval, like you said, turn the pre-approval into a firm approval within a certain period of time, so that if worst case scenario we don't get the mortgage that we want, the client can back out of the purchase without any penalties. And then other conditions that you advise your clients on, like status, inspection,
totally,
that type of thing.
Yes, conditions are great when we can include them, and in this market, for the most part, we have a lot of leeway with conditions. One thing actually that I've been seeing a lot, which is driving me crazy, is agents asking me to remove financing conditions when I am the only offer. The property's been on the market for who knows how long, collecting dust, and they call me and they're like, is your client pre-approved? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, so why do you have a mortgage condition in there? And I was like, this is a legitimate phone call I had recently. I said, pre-approval is not a final approval, right? And she was like, what? Like, you need the property to get the final approval. And this particular property was a 70s condo townhouse.
Okay.
And there were no relevant comps. We did get the property for like $80,000 less than the most recent sale in the complex a couple months prior. Of course. Classic. But still, I was, they're first time buyers. We're the only offer. It's been on the market for months. We're already conditional on inspection and status, so we're going to be conditional. What use is there removing the financing condition? And there seems to be some like perception that, I don't know if it's the agents or that the sellers have, that having a mortgage condition or a financing condition in your offer means that your financing is not sorted out. And that, to me, is a load of BS.
Yeah.
Like, it is in there to protect the buyers in case there is something with the property. For example, it's an estate sale. It's being sold in as-is conditions. As-is conditions. Some lenders do not like that term in the APS, and that could be a problem. Or, something about the age, or there are so many factors that could go wrong. And when we're in this market, like, why wouldn't I include a financing condition?
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there was another one that same week where the agent asked, we were in competition this time. And not only that, but the price of, for sure, the other offer, and we were not far from what the property was purchased for. This was a condo in 2021.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we were close.
Yeah.
And the agent was like, well, can you remove your financing condition? And I was like, no. I need to make sure that this will appraise because you realize how close we're toying. Like, that this is high. And she's like, well, the other buyers took it out. And I was like, good for them. When they don't get their mortgage, have fun with that. Like, it's so crazy to me that this is something that some agents are so insistent on, when it's not, like, I'd rather us have the condition, and then if it doesn't go through, it doesn't go through, than at the last minute have to default on the purchase.
For sure.
Like it blows my mind that that's something that some people just don't understand.
Yeah. I have realtors that ask me sometimes, so it's like, well, they're pre-approved, so can't we take out the financing condition? And like you said, there's a lot of factors that go into it. Sometimes when the borrower is looking to borrow, like we're looking for a small exception from the lender, for example,
Yep.
and something that they won't review without having a purchase in place. So I can do as much due diligence as possible, even call in a couple favors at the lender and say, hey, can you look into this for me? And they'll say, yeah, we can likely approve it, but it'll have to go to credit management for them to sign off, for example.
Yeah.
That happens sometimes when we're looking for a small exception to like stretch the mortgage a little bit.
Sure.
Someone who's self-employed and has like a large variance in their income year over year.
Yeah.
There's certain situations where I can say, to the best of my knowledge and based on my experience, there should be no issues, but there is a small chance that the credit manager will come back and say, no, sorry. There's still other lenders that we can go to, but we want to get our first choice mortgage. And having a financing condition in there gives us the opportunity to make sure that we can get that approval before firming up on the purchase.
Yeah. And that's why, like, I always, before we move forward with that, if you're looking for example, a starter home in the Junction, there's a good probability that you're going to be in competition and you might not be able to have that condition in there.
Right.
But whenever we do that, I would reach out to you, assuming you're the mortgage broker, because why wouldn't you be? And ask you if you think if we're good on this property without a condition up to this price, and you'll kind of give me the cap that you're comfortable with them going unconditional at.
Yep.
And then if we need to stretch past that, then you'd want the condition in there. So there's always like communication between the two of us that I think is like so critical for the buyer to have that kind of open communication between the mortgage broker and the agent.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my next question / point. What is the benefit of working with a mortgage broker over like a mortgage advisor, financial advisor at a bank, for example?
Yeah, great question. This is something that I usually start off my consultations with my clients, just so they know exactly what my role in the process is as a mortgage broker, because a lot of people don't really know. They don't know what the difference is between working with the mortgage specialist at their bank when they walk into their bank versus working with somebody like me. There's a lot of misconceptions. Like, a lot of people think that mortgage brokers charge fees, so I'd like to address that up front, that in most cases, if you are an A client and we're getting you a bank mortgage, I don't charge any fees. The lender pays my commission when I close the mortgage. So there's no additional cost to working with me as opposed to compared to working directly with the bank, which is something I like to address up front. I have access to a long list of lenders, including the big banks, credit unions, and other mortgage companies. And my firm does a lot of volume with a lot of different lenders. So we have good relationships with a lot of different lenders as well, which helps us get things done, in a pinch, or get exceptions that, you may not be able to get at your bank as well. When it comes to interest rates, different banks have different times of year when they eat up market share. So you'll find Scotiabank and RBC are very competitive in the spring, and then TD and CIBC are very competitive in the fall. And they kind of take their turns, like kind of jockeying for first position as far as who's offering the best deal. And then they, they take up some market share. As a mortgage broker, having access to a multitude of lenders gives me access to whoever is offering the best rates and the best discounts and cashbacks at any given time throughout the year.
Yeah.
I think accessibility is also a big thing.
Accessibility is one of the biggest things, in my opinion, just like from my experience working with you and other mortgage brokers and working with, clients who are getting their mortgage through the bank. Like, sometimes it takes a week to hear back from their mortgage advisor at the bank. And like, sometimes you got to move quick. Like, the right house comes up, you have to be able to, send an email, be like, hey, am I good to proceed on this property, given like, because, property taxes, maintenance fees, anything like that always plays into their borrowing power. And sometimes we need to get a quick response. And I find when we're dealing with the bank, it can take days. Whereas with you, unless you're dealing with an emergency, you will probably reply within an hour.
Most likely, yeah. And in the evenings and weekends, I think, is another big thing, especially if you're seeing 5, 6, 7 properties on the weekend and then they have an offer night on Monday night. It's like, we need to nail down exactly what our max budget can be for a specific property.
Totally. Or if we want to be competitive and get an offer in on the weekend when other people might not be ready to go.
Yeah.
And then being able to give you a call and say, hey, so-and-so really want to offer on this house. Can you just like do a quick check, make sure everything is fine, and then get the go ahead from you.
For sure. And like, not to speak badly about bank reps at all. Like, some of them are really good. There's a lot of them that made a whole career out of being, you know, the best mortgage specialist at CIBC or something like that. And I work with a few of them as well, like to send clients back and forth in rare situations where they can't do it or I can't do it. You know, they can come in and help out in a pinch. But, you know, being able to have access on evenings and weekends with some reasonable boundaries, you know, for family and stuff like that, I think is very important, especially in
you value family over your job.
I mean, it's close.
Depends on the day.
Say this on camera, but yeah. I mean, my job feeds my family, so there's kind of a
Catherine, if you're watching, plug your ears. Yeah, I'm with you totally. Like, none of this is to say anything bad about it. It's more so just because, like, the way that I see it is, the mortgage broker's job, like an independent mortgage broker, your job is to represent the client. Whereas the mortgage advisors at the bank, their job is to work for the bank. So you have more skin in the game to, like, really want to get things done for them, and, you know, like, you're more motivated to negotiate with the lender to get them a better rate, to get them a better deal. Whereas the advisor at the bank may not be. And then they often also are working, you know, they're in office or typical business hours. Whereas with most self-employed individuals, we have a difficult time setting actual hours of operations. And we are much more accessible outside of business hours, which is when your average person is actually available and thinking about their home search.
For sure. And making offers and viewing properties.
Yeah. Our business hours are almost the inverse of the average person's business hours, because we need to be available to speak to them when they're available, which is not during work time.
Totally. And going back to what you said about representing the client and not the lender, I oftentimes will say, you know, we can get this rate here and this rate here. I might be able to use this bank to leverage that other bank to get you a better rate here. If the person is already full service with TD Bank, for example, and they're like, I really want my mortgage to be with TD. Maybe TD's not offering the best rates at that time. I might be able to leverage a deal from another lender.
Yeah, like Scotiabank's offering us 3.9%, so you have to give us at least 3.9%.
For sure.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, on the topic of the big banks, who right now are you seeing the best rates with?
Right now, Scotiabank is the most competitive. They're not offering cash back. They require you to open a Scotia account with them, but their rates are pretty fantastic right now.
So we're filming on August 22nd. What kind of rates are you seeing with them? Say for a 5-year fixed.
So Scotia just put out 5-year fixed are not as competitive as 3-year fixed these days.
Okay, say 3-year fixed.
3-year fixed, you'll get 3.99 with Scotiabank right now.
Okay.
At least that's the deal that's being offered to my brokerage.
Okay.
If you're purchasing with 20% down, if you're purchasing with less than 20% down, right now they're offering 3.69.
Wow.
There are some conditions, like it has to close within 30 days, but there's a little bit of wiggle room there, and we can always wait until we're 30 days and then apply. Yeah, the way the big banks work is they have like troughs of money that need to go out at a certain time.
So they're like, we need to get this money out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And they do things like, they think in 3 years from now rates are going to be higher, so they'll offer a great rate on a 3-year fixed and know that you'll be renewing in 3 years, so then they'll get you on a higher rate in 3 years. They have their own projections and, you know, metrics by which they do these things. But like I said, they each come up as the most competitive at a certain time of year. So Scotia knows we're going into the fall market now. Let's offer some great rates and eat up some market share.
Yeah. Man, rates.
Yeah. It's not always about the rate.
It is not always about the rate. That's very true. But yeah, I'm just like, I'm counting down the days until my mortgage is up for renewal in December, and I have to kiss my sweet 1.9 goodbye.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. You
may
never
know.
See that again.
I probably will never see it again, Jacob. Thank you for the reminder. Well, I will go cry now.
We'll make it work.
It'll be fine. It's going to be so fine.
Yeah.
It'll be fine. It's just the number is so nice and low.
Totally.
And I know it won't be that low.
Just to speak on that for a little bit, there's a lot of people that purchased in 2020 and 2021 who have their 5-year fixed mortgages coming up for renewal this year and next year. 60% of Canadian mortgages are renewing in 2025 and 2026, which is a huge amount. People are coming off that, like you said, sub 2% rate, and now we're getting something closer to 4%. Just so everybody knows, when your rate doubles, it doesn't mean your payment is going to double. Your
Yes.
payment will definitely go up
Yep.
by a couple hundred, maybe $1,000 a month, just depending on the size of your mortgage.
Yeah.
But it's not, your payment doesn't double because the interest rate
Yeah,
doubles.
you're not
That's
going
just
from
something to
2,000
know.
to 4,000.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And a lot of people are stressed out about that. Like, you know, I'm sure you are, like you just mentioned. It's
I'm not that stressed.
It's on the forefront of a lot of people's minds because, you know, your mortgage is a huge expense, and sure, your income may have gone up and you've paid your mortgage down a little bit, but as we know, you know, our wages are not increasing the way that they could to keep up with the housing market.
Sure.
And
And
that type
also
of thing.
like also you get used to a certain payment. Like mine comes automatically out of my account. I don't even think about it. Like I know that's my payment. It comes out every other week. And now the numbers will change.
Yeah.
But because I knew this was going to happen. Like as soon as rates started going up, I was like, well, it's not going to be 1.9 when I renew.
Yep.
I've been like very aggressively paying it down. So I think that feel like you've run the numbers for me. My payment will be very similar to what it is now.
Yep.
Because the balance is so much lower.
Yeah. And if you have a mortgage coming up for renewal, don't stress. Shop around.
Call Jacob.
Get in touch. I can help you negotiate with your existing lender if you don't have the opportunity to move somewhere else, or we can look at every different lender on the market to make sure you're getting the best rate and leverage that, and maybe stay with your existing lender and get them to offer you something better. Don't feel pressured to sign a renewal early because rates may continue to come down, and you want to run out that 1.9% as long as you can.
If you're liking this episode so far, don't forget to check out my other socials and hit subscribe. On the topic of pandemic mortgages, and would you say 60% of Canadian mortgages are up for renewal in the next 2 years?
Through 2025 and 2026. I mean, we're already halfway through 2025, but it's the majority of it is the beginning of COVID mortgages, which was what, like,
Can we
May
just
it started
say,
to pop off?
by the way, that it's the middle of 2025, which means the pandemic was half of a decade ago. It feels like yesterday.
Yeah. And in this industry, think of what's happened in the last 5 years. It's been nuts.
Full like 180, maybe even a 275 degree.
And then back a little bit and then back.
Yeah. Pendulum.
Yeah.
It's a pendulum.
It's been a lot.
So there's a lot in the news about how, you know, the fear of people coming up for renewals at substantially higher rates, whether or not they'll be able to qualify, whether or not they'll be able to make their new payments. And, you know, the doomers and the gloomers of specifically Reddit talking about how the market is just going to plummet.
Yes.
Because everyone's going to have to sell because they won't be able to afford their new mortgages. So can you just like touch on, you know, what someone should do if they feel like they're getting into a position where they cannot afford their mortgage anymore?
For sure. First, what I will say about that and everything in the media about defaults and arrears, I have a very cool chart on it, but basically in Canada, our arrears rate is exceptionally low compared to the US and the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Our mortgage qualification standards are exceptionally rigorous.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why they are so rigorous is because it keeps our arrears rates low. So when you see that, you know, arrears have gone up 13% in the last year or something like that, we're still at a very, very small amount of mortgages in arrears compared to other nations that we compare ourselves with when it comes to things like real estate. So, you know, take everything with a grain of salt. Sure, they have gone up, but we're not at the levels of other countries because our qualifying standards are more difficult. So in that initial stage where you feel like you're giving everything and a pint of blood and your DNA sample and everything the lender's asking for, it's
Your fingerprints.
everything. Firstborn child, it's all there.
Did you have to give your firstborn child away, or
No, I still have
you
him.
got to keep him?
Yes,
Oh, you poor
but
thing.
I feel like it's because I'm in the industry. I have like some connections.
Oh, you
I
got
was able
the
to, like,
loophole.
circumvent that.
Got it. Okay.
So yeah, our arrears rates are very low comparatively, but it is still increasing. My recommendation, if you're ever in a situation where you think you might be risking missing a mortgage payment, don't sweep it under the rug. Be proactive about it. Contact your lender right away. If you tell them, oh, you know, I'm under financial stress and I may be, you know, at risk of missing a mortgage payment, they're not going to pull the mortgage on you.
Yeah.
They actually have dedicated departments for situations like this where they're mandated by the federal government to work with their borrowers to find a customized plan to get you back on your feet, whether it's a 6-month or 12-month like interest only plan where they shrink your payments down so you're paying only interest and not making any contribution towards principal. Sure, it's not great, but it's better than missing a mortgage payment.
Totally.
When you do miss a payment, it sticks on your credit and it stays there for a long time, and you'll have trouble getting approved with any other lender in the future. And your existing lender may not renew your mortgage at the renewal date if you do miss a payment.
And then you would have to sell.
or find another lender to take on your mortgage, which may
Yeah.
be difficult if you have a history of missing mortgage payments. So moral of the story, don't be proactive about it. Contact your mortgage broker. They should be able to advise you. Contact your bank and just let them know what's going on, and they should be able
Yeah.
to work with you to get you back on your feet.
And the other thing too is banks don't want you to default on your mortgage. They don't want to deal with a foreclosure.
They don't.
Right? So there is a new mandate also, right, that the government's put in place. Am I correct?
For a power of sale?
No, for like lenders working with borrowers under duress or under financial distress.
Yeah, specifically it was issued, I think it was in 2024, early
Yeah,
2024.
about a year ago.
Part of like the charter from the finance ministry that lenders have to work with their borrowers, or they're mandated to make an effort to cooperate with their borrowers.
Yeah.
And like you said, no lenders want to foreclose or go power of sale. It's reputational risk. Like nobody wants to see in the news that, CIBC foreclosed on 20,000 homes last year. Like nobody wants to see
PR
that.
nightmare.
Yeah, totally.
And power of sales are also really interesting because there's this like perception that a lot of buyers have that a power of sale equals a good deal. They're like, I'm going to get a steal because it's a power of sale. Bank doesn't care. Lenders actually have a legal obligation to like attempt to sell for fair market value. So if they just list a house for $300,000 below what the actual value is and then sell it for that because they just wanted to offload it, like that could be an issue for them, correct?
For sure. Yeah. With power of sale, they're obligated to make some attempt to get fair market value.
Yeah.
The lender gets their money back and any additional proceeds after legal fees and everything.
Sure.
Because that does eat up a big chunk of the proceeds as
if
well.
anything is left, then that would go to
It goes to the borrower. To the homeowner. Yeah.
Yeah. So then if for example, there's an $800,000 mortgage outstanding and the property is like probably worth around $1 million, but then the bank is like, we're just going to sell it for 810 so we can recoup our costs and who cares about the borrower, then the borrower could turn around and sue them.
Right.
So if you are a buyer that really wants a steal, your better bet is to find someone who's about to foreclose, who is like getting there, as opposed to someone who like the bank has already taken over.
For sure. And do you have experience, like, do you have clients that come to you and say, I want a power of sales?
So many. They're like,
deal.
Can you find me a list of power of sales? And I'm like, no.
Yeah. Do you
Yes,
find that like
I can.
the property condition is like, in some cases you'll find properties in terrible condition?
Yeah, because, either the homeowner knows that the bank's going to take over, so now they trash the house, or, it's been empty for months. The bank doesn't, like, they're not making any efforts to present the house. So usually the listing, like the photos are awful, the condition is awful, it's dirty.
Yep.
And those are always sold in as-is condition as well, because the bank can't give you any warranties as to the condition of a house they've probably never stepped foot inside of.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of risk to buyers for typically not much reward. And so while I wouldn't necessarily shy away from a power of sale, like if it comes up within the criteria, I'm not going to be like, no, let's not look at this because it's a power of sale. I do explain to them what the risks are and the pros and cons of that. And, if they want to see it, we see it. But when I have someone who comes to me and they're specifically like, I want to buy a power of sale because I want to get a deal. Well, first of all, what does a deal mean to you? That's a very like up for interpretation kind of term.
Sure.
A deal is what? 10% off the price, 10% off the market value. What does a deal mean and why do you want one? Like, there's a lot more like probing that needs to go in when I get that kind of request. But yeah, I mean, power of sales are, can be a pain.
For sure. And similar, but also very different as an estate sale.
Yes.
And we did one together just recently as well. And
we did.
Sometimes the motivation of the sellers in that situation is just to close as quickly as possible because they just want to get everything wrapped up and put that kind of in their past. Mm-hmm. And so that can be a great opportunity for a client who has the ability to close quickly to be able to get a
this
deal.
Estate sale in particular that you are talking about was an extra good. This one, I feel like the appraisal, they were like, is this real?
Yep.
Because the listing agent was also the executor of the estate,
right,
and the brother of the owner who had passed away, and was an agent, but like not from Toronto, like from well out of Toronto,
yep,
who does not know Toronto, probably doesn't have access to Treb.
Yep.
I don't know. Anyways, not relevant. And I saw the list price and I was like, oh my God. And this happened during the big snowstorm in February,
Yep.
when there was like 3 feet of snow on the ground. And I was like, do you guys still want to go see it? And they were like, well, we live close, so we can truck our way over. Can you? And I was like, absolutely. I will be there in 1 hour. And I drove 3 kilometers an hour all the way there.
Yeah.
Because none of the streets, this was early in the morning, none of the streets have been plowed, but I didn't want to miss out on that opportunity. No one had shoveled. And the agent actually told me that he saw me on the camera, like trekking through the, like, snow literally up to my knees to get to the house. But that worked in our favor because he said there were several other showings booked for that weekend. All of them canceled because no one wanted to trek out in the snow.
Amazing.
We used it to our advantage.
Yeah.
We got a great price. And then I remember you messaged me and you were like, do you think, every time you text me and you're like, hey, do you think this house will, like, the appraisal will have any issues with the appraisal? I have a panic attack. I'm like, why? Did you hear something? Is there something? Should I be worried? And the answer is always no. But with this one, you asked me and I was like, no, Jacob, we will not have any issues with the appraisal.
Yeah.
We got this for practically free.
Yep.
And
I always like to ask just in case, right?
Sure.
It sets my expectations and I can help set the client's expectations because I don't have my finger on the pulse of the market the way that you do. But when the lender requests an appraisal,
but you mean you don't advise buyers on what the fair market value of homes are?
I'm not that kind of mortgage broker. No.
Okay.
No, I stick to the financing side. I stay in my lane. But with this one in particular, I think the appraisal even came back higher than the purchase price, which
is
rarely
so
ever
rare.
happens. The appraiser knows that we're looking for a certain value,
Yeah.
which is the purchase price. They don't usually make an attempt to go above that unless was a really, really good deal. In this case, they did.
And not only that, there were some things that came up in the home inspection, so we ended up getting more off the price.
Yep.
Mortgage fraud.
Okay.
We love fraud in Canada, don't we?
It happens. It's around.
So there is something that we, as real estate mortgage professionals, must do, which is called FinTrack. And it's like financial reporting obligations to essentially make sure that there's no money laundering happening or money being used from the proceeds of like criminal activity. And I know you mentioned that when you do the pre-approval, you pretty much like need their DNA. Like it feels so invasive to be giving all of these documents to someone. And then on top of that, then you get me calling you and being like, hey, I have to ask you some questions. Are you directly related to the head of an international organization or like a high up member of the federal government? And every time I get the most two common answers I get are, why are you asking me this? And I wish. I respond with, I don't wish, because that is a lot more paperwork that you don't want me to have to fill out.
Yep.
And why are you asking me this is because Canada for a long time was a very, popular money laundering destination. And so the government has put a lot of protections in place to help prevent from that happening, and also mortgage fraud.
Yes.
You want to touch on that?
I will, sure. So we just had our FinTrack requirements stepped up as well. So we have to ask our clients very similar questions, and we also have to do a whole bunch more of what we call suitability, or basically, why we recommended this type of mortgage to the client and the process that we went through to vet them as well.
Okay.
We've always had very strict anti-money laundering guidelines, or AML guidelines, insofar as how many bank statements we have to collect to review where your down payment came from. Standard is usually 90 days, so 3 months of bank statements to show where your down payment is located and show that you've accumulated it in above board type of way.
Yeah.
If you have had a large sum of money come in and it's been sitting in your bank account for years, they're not going to go back to see where that money came from, as long as it's reasonable. If you're 25 and you have $2 million in the bank, the lender is going to start asking more questions about where that money came from. Was it an inheritance?
TikTok influencers, obviously.
Right. Yeah. We got to show that. We got to show where it came from. And lenders are they can ask any questions that they want. And if they don't feel comfortable, they can decline, and you have to move on to a different lender, or, really reassess the situation. But the crux of it is that, yes, there is a lot of fraud. There's a lot of identity fraud. There's a lot of mortgage fraud, and there's a lot of money laundering that goes on. And we have to abide by these compliance regulations to make sure that we're doing our jobs to mitigate that in some fashion. in the grand scheme of things, it's really there to protect everybody, because the more we can cut down on fraud and the more we can cut down on money laundering, the easier it is for the average person to actually qualify for a mortgage that they need, not be in competition with somebody who's bringing a lot of money in from overseas to buy a place in cash, and that's squeezing the first time buyer out.
Which they can't do anymore.
Exactly. So there's a lot of regulations in place to try and limit that. And at the end of the day, it does help the average Canadian person, although the average Canadian person has to jump through a lot more hoops to get to that point. The point is that we're trying to, push out the bad and make room for more of the good.
Have you ever had a deal or a situation where you were like, ooh, this is fishy?
Personally, no. At my office, we've had a couple situations where we needed to move on from the client because the story just wasn't making sense about where the money came from.
Yeah.
And they would maybe flip-flop on their story a little bit. And it's just like, okay, at the end of the day, my license is the most important thing, and I don't want to risk my license because...
jail.
Yeah.
Or maybe not jail, but like we do get slapped with pretty big fines if we are not thorough with our FinTrack obligations.
Yeah, it can be very serious. And there's 3 steps to it too. Like there's yourself, there's myself, and then the lawyer has to go through their own due diligence, which is very similar with identity verification and anti-money laundering questionnaire and that type of thing.
Totally.
As well.
And with that, if there is someone who has family that lives outside of Canada who is going to be gifting them money, or perhaps they sold a property that they had overseas and are going to be using that money, are there any additional steps that, they should be aware of that they have to take with money coming from outside of Canada?
Yeah, that's also a great question. It depends on the country that it's coming from. Some countries are a little bit higher up on the risk list, and some countries are like super easy as far as money coming in. But if it's like the sale of a property and it happened recently, we may need to collect the sale agreement and track the funds from that bank account in that country over to Canada. In a more extensive case, we might have to have the documents translated if it's in a different language,
right.
Or the lender might have somebody who speaks that language that can kind of step in and make sure the documents look okay. If it's a gift from a family member, we'll need a gift letter signed. It has to be reasonable. It can't be like a 4th cousin or something like that with a different last name. Then it gets really difficult to get the lender on board with something like that. But if it's a parent or a sibling who lives in that country, that it makes sense for them to be gifting them that much money.
Yeah.
We just have to make it make sense and be able to support it with the right documents. And so when I'm asking my clients for all of these documents, just have to make sure that they know. It's not because I'm being nosy. It's because that's what the lender's going to want, and I just want to make sure we have everything together and we're not scrambling last minute.
Yeah, for sure. I know that at the beginning of this, I said we were going to try to follow the pathway of the purchase, and we ADHD'd a little bit too hard and have not done that.
We just get so excited about the different
We're very
topics
passionate about our jobs.
It's nerdy, but also cool.
It's okay. It's fine. We just FinTrack gets you going.
So excited.
Okay. There is one thing that we have not touched on that I think is really important, which is the stress test. Do you want to explain what the stress test is and why it's so important?
Yes, I will. So the stress test came into effect at the end of 2018 and into the beginning of 2019, when, if anybody can remember pre-COVID, which I have a hard time remembering anything that happened before COVID, but the housing market was heating up in like a pre-COVID type of way. And so the government put some regulations in place as an effort to cool the market a little bit. And one of them was the stress test. And basically it meant that any borrower needed to qualify for a mortgage that was more expensive than the mortgage they were actually getting. To be specific, the rules were either 2% higher than your actual rate, or a benchmark rate, which at that time was between 4.5% and 5.25%. Either way, you were qualifying for a mortgage that had a higher interest rate than your actual mortgage, just to make sure that if rates did go up, you would still be able to make those payments in accordance to whatever our debt servicing guidelines are, basically how much you're eligible to borrow. The government just wanted to make sure that if rates did go up, that you would be able to still make those payments. And at the same time, it also pushed down everybody's max budget, because you're now qualifying for a mortgage that's more expensive. So across the board, everybody's affordability or everybody's maximum budget decreased, which was an effort to cool the housing market, basically. So then a year and a bit later, COVID happened, and then kind of all of this went out the window because rates went down so far that like qualifying at 2% more of your actual rate didn't really make a difference in the grand scheme of things. We saw rates come back up, and what happened was a lot of people were we saw less defaults because people were qualifying for mortgages that were more expensive than the ones they actually got. Their rates actually did go up. So the stress test provided a bit of buffer for those people who took variable rates at that time.
Right. But then rates went up more.
Much more.
Way more.
Yeah.
So that was a little sticky.
Totally. Nobody saw that coming, obviously, but the stress test did kind of add a little bit of a buffer in that way.
That was such a crazy time. Like, it's been, what, a year and a half now since we've kind of like left that like rapid rate increase era. But that was just, it was so wild. And this is like off topic, but it just like triggered a memory of when we were in early 2022. I remember I was so frustrated. I was working with so many first time buyers and they kept getting priced out. Like, you'd say a 1-bed condo with parking sells for $600,000. Then the next one, literally same exact unit, same building, sells for $615,000, $620,000, $630,000. The comps were not relevant anymore. It was literally, I will give you every last penny I have in my bank account. And it felt at that time, as we were entering into like, I'm going to say like February 2022, like the peak, it felt like it was never going to end and it felt like nothing could stop it. And then rates started coming up and buyers were like, we're still going to buy. And it took a while before really like the brakes brakes were put on everything. But it was just such a wild time because it really, for a bit there, felt like it wasn't going to get better.
Yeah.
And now I look back and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. Like the fall of 2021 for me was insane because now like I'll have the same client load, but I'm not out and about as much because something would be listed in the morning and literally that afternoon we were seeing everything. Yeah. And then by the evening, half of them had 7 offers already. And so I literally I blacked out the fall of 2021. I don't think I was home ever. I was in my car the entire time. And it was just so, it's so crazy thinking about how the market has changed from when the pandemic started until now. And like the progressions are just for sure so crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. I think back to that time and I compare it to now, like lenders were so behind. We were like 10 days, 15 days for an approval, like minimum, because they were so backlogged and understaffed and financing conditions were not a thing.
No.
Like if you had any chance of getting your offer accepted, it was a firm, clean offer with no conditions, which made my job very difficult to advise clients on like, sure, there are risks going in firm, but you have to go in firm if you want to buy a property anytime this month, next month. Who knows when it's going to end, like you said.
Yeah, it really felt like it was never going to end, and then it ended.
Yeah.
And now it's like, it's so different. It's so crazy.
Yeah. Going back to what you said about the stress test, is there are talks of the stress test being removed now that the market has cooled to a certain point, but shifting to each lender policing themselves individually about how many more like higher risk files they take on. So they do their own, it's called a loan to income, so an LTI assessment on the individual borrower, and each lender has its own kind of amount of those higher risk LTI clients that they can take on, which is another advantage of working with a mortgage broker, because maybe one lender is full of those types of clients, but there's 3 more that we can put you with if you're kind of in that bucket. So it's probably more like a 2026 thing, but they are talking about removing the stress test and moving to something like the lenders policing themselves internally.
Do you think that that's a good idea, like removing the stress test? The main reason I ask is because it was obviously put in for a reason, and every market is cyclical. Right now, the market is slow. There will be a day in the future where it is not, and it is crazy again, whether that's in a year or 5 years, the day will come. And at that point, if the stress test is removed, like, will it be an issue in the future?
I think real estate, especially in the GTA, is always going to be volatile to a certain extent. Yeah. It's always going to be going up and coming down. And, the government can do what they can to like push things in either direction. But I think that removing the stress test and moving it to like a individual lender based qualification thing, it'll make my job more difficult, because then I will have to know each lender's individual policy, but it will give me more of an advantage in the market as well, because I can direct the clients based on who is accepting borrowers with their specific credit profile. I think, you know, if the stress test goes away, it may still come back. Like, you know, it's not going to be gone forever. It's a tough question to answer.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I just had to ask.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay. I feel like we talked about a lot of fun stuff. I think we absolutely will need to have you back on to talk about more nitty gritty. This was really, I feel like, mortgage 101.
Totally.
Like what you should know about mortgages. And I think we could talk a lot more about, you know, the nuances, what to do if you're like upsizing or downsizing, for example, when you have to buy and sell.
For sure.
And also more into the nitty gritty on first time home buyers and benefits and programs that are offered to them. But I feel like
there's a lot. It's really like a 5-day course, Mortgages 101. So it's hard to boil it down into like, you know,
should we make a course and sell it to people for so much money and then they can...
I don't really have time for that. I'm sorry. I can't commit to something like that at this point.
I totally do not. Yeah, not for me. There will be no 5-day course for money. We will give you a 5-day course for free maybe at some point in time, but not for money.
Just book a call. Come talk.
Just call us.
That's it.
Not after 8 p.m.
No.
Before 8 p.m.
My Calendly link is in the thing. Just book it in.
Oh, great.
Maybe.
Okay.
I don't know if it is. Yeah, it could be.
We'll get you some sort of links. We'll figure it out.
Okay. Link in bio.
Link
is that a thing still?
In bio is a thing.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Thanks, Jacob.
Anytime. Happy to chat.